Have you ever wondered what your therapist thinks about after hours or in between sessions? This is an opportunity for us to sit down with your therapist, my wife, peel back the curtain a little bit and get to know what's on her mind. My name is Price, and I married your therapist.
Hi, my name is Ash, and I'm a licensed therapist. Please keep in mind that even though this is a podcast about mental health and it does involve a therapist, it's not the same thing as therapy or a replacement for it.
Yeah, welcome to our kitchen table.
Yeah, welcome to our home.
Before we dive into this episode, we have a few announcements to make. First, you are going to be a guest on a podcast later next week.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
I'll be on a podcast called Confidentially Insecure. It's by someone named Sam Taylor, who talks about mental health, I believe with like college age students, with young adults.
Yeah.
It's very cool. He's a British podcaster, so I'm super excited about that, and it'll be fun to connect with somebody.
Yeah, totally. We're so excited. He seems great. His podcast is fantastic.
Yep.
We highly recommend that if you like our content, definitely check out what he's got going on. We'll be sharing some links to his information so that you can follow him, and we're excited to get you on there.
Yeah.
We have another announcement. We have great news.
Great news.
We got our first iTunes review.
Woo!
Woo! Yes, there is a little bit of a bad side to this
announcement. A little bit of bad news. You go.
It was a 1-star review.
It came after a big wave of hate that we got, or during a big wave of hate that we got.
Yep.
For talking about trans kids.
Yeah, we posted a reel on Instagram where you were sharing in our last episode about how it's okay to accept trans kids for who they are, and then a lot of people came out and claimed that you were on cocaine and meth, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
And said that you were a groomer, that you're out to mutilate kids.
Yep.
Rebuttal?
I'm going to keep advocating for trans kids, so.
Yeah. I feel like Michael Scott in The Office, like, you know what? Ever since you said that, I'm going to start advocating for trans kids even harder.
It really does make me think, though, about how hard it is to go out and exist in the world as a trans person.
Yeah.
That's obviously something I know from counseling experience and from working with those folks, but gosh, it's hard to like show up in those spaces and do that. So I'm gonna keep doing it, and I'm like proud to get to put out that content. But we did get a 1-star review, and if you
which for our first review is actually, I wouldn't want to care about one single 1-star review. That really doesn't matter to me, but it's our first one.
It is our first one. So if you like the podcast and if you'd like to help us stand up to some of the hatred, we would love if you would go on and leave some counter reviews.
I think what we're trying to say is that if you don't give us a 4 or 5-star review,
you're a transphobe. Wait, am I allowed to say that?
That's what I was getting to. Yeah. Okay. So the only other thing I want to say is that I've been learning a little bit about recording podcasts and the do's or don'ts. And in terms of equipment and setup, we have a long way to go to like where I would like to be. But there are also a bunch of things that you shouldn't do while recording, like open a can of LaCroix while live. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, I had to get that out of the way. I am a LaCroix boy.
You are.
Sponsored by LaCroix. Just kidding. Okay, so today we are talking about neuro-spicy relationships.
Yeah, relationships with people who are neurodivergent.
As you started getting into your career as a therapist, it was so interesting to me how frequently you were talking to clients about how to navigate being in a relationship with someone who is neurodivergent.
Yeah, a couple of things were happening is that I was hearing the same complaints again and again.
Right.
From people in relationships about their partner. And there started to be a clear pattern with people who were dating people who were ADHD or who were autistic, and that being able to just provide some context for that almost immediately made those relationships so much easier.
Right.
And it was so cool to get to identify those patterns and provide that information. And then the other thing that I was seeing is quite a few partnerships, how common it was to have pairings between couples where one was ADHD and one was autistic. which is our relationship.
Yeah. Autistic and ADHD.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a bit of an interesting pairing because we see it a lot. And especially you see it a lot with your clients.
Yeah, I see it a lot.
I think that it's been interesting to talk through this as a topic because so much of the closeness that we've achieved in our marriage has been because of our ability to learn more about who we are as people and the ways that we are neurodivergent. So the things that make you autistic were things that really bothered me and frustrated me early on in our relationship.
Yeah.
And then I realized, you're not doing some of these things on purpose. It's just a part of the way that your brain is wired and vice versa for me.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get to talk to you about some of the ways that we've grown in our marriage through understanding each other better and the ways that you encourage your clients to understand their partners a little bit better so that they can grow their relationship in a similar way.
Yeah.
So I want to go first. I want to talk about autistic tendencies of yours that really bothered me when we first started dating.
Okay.
And when we first got married. I really couldn't believe your inability to have any sort of volume control. You were either way too quiet or way too loud, and you seemed to not be able to really find a good balance.
Yeah.
You were either like yelling at me, like, shh, quiet down. Or most of the time, I would look over at you and your mouth would be moving and I couldn't hear you say anything. And we had actual fights over it where I was like, why the fuck will you not speak to me at a volume that I can't hear you? I've asked you again and again and again to do that and you simply will not. To the point that I was like, she's got to be fucking with me, right? Like, she's got to be really trying to gaslight me or something, like
you really took it as a sign of disrespect too, that I was doing that. And so the infuriating thing about this is that I would be talking unaware that the volume was so low, or at what felt like, it just feels normal. So it felt like you always hear me at the volume that I'm talking because it's just the way that I'm talking. And so you wouldn't be able to hear me. And you would be upset. You would think I was doing that on purpose. You'd say that I was being disrespectful. You'd say, you'd remind me how many times you had asked me to do that. And then I was confused that it was happening in the first place. It also really frustrated me that you jumped straight to anger and that you weren't just telling me that you couldn't hear me. Which I think is something that happens when we have these relationship patterns, is that you start to assume the worst of that pattern instead of that just being a characteristic of somebody that you're with. And so you would jump straight to this anger because it did feel like I was intentionally doing something.
Well, for me, not realizing that it wasn't intentional, the assumption was because you're so thoughtful as a person. If I ask you to do something, or if I ask you to stop doing something, that's it. That's the end of the conversation. You will almost always just accommodate me and permanently change your behavior.
So another part of an autistic pattern is memorizing those details and is loving patterns and that sort of thing. So a joke in our relationship has always been, if you tell me, hey, I my sandwiches cut this way forever and ever and ever and ever, that's the way it's going to be. And sometimes it's about silly things where it's not actually a preference. And I have a hard time telling those things apart where I'll do it the same way every time. But I didn't raise my volume appropriately.
I really, with that context, asking you over and over again to raise your volume and then you would not was bizarre because you were so accommodating of anything that I needed that I'm asking you to please speak to me at a volume that I can hear you, and that wasn't happening. And so it started to feel disrespectful because it was this has got to be purposeful because Ashlyn isn't forgetful like this. This is not who she is, and I definitely let my anger get the best of me a number of times over that specific issue. And it took really you kind of coming out as autistic and me doing some research and learning from you what that meant and how your brain worked and how volume control isn't the strong suit of some people with autism.
Yeah, that autistic folks tend to struggle with volume control, that we tend to talk too quietly or too loudly. And I say those things in quotation marks because I still have a hard time understanding when that's happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a common trait. And it feels very, very difficult for me to adjust. When I'm talking quietly, I think that it might have to do with me balancing out two things. One, I do that when I'm like very happy, when I'm feeling a strong emotion.
Right.
So very happy or very upset. But I think I just do it in general when I'm overstimulated, which can come with having any sort of strong emotion.
Right.
And it is very, very taxing for me to try to raise my volume to the point that I almost can't focus on what I'm saying anymore. And there's almost a physical sensation that goes with it if I'm having to do that.
Yeah. So the beautiful balance that we've been able to find is that sometimes I just can't hear you.
Yeah, so that works.
No, it's now that I know what's going on, asking you to repeat yourself is no longer frustrating because it's not like, oh, she's doing this on purpose or she's being careless. I'm like, oh, this is just who she is.
Yeah.
And this is how her brain works. This is how she interacts with the world. This isn't about me at all.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
And that's a lot of the wonderful part of, I think, most of the things that we're talking about today is that it's going to feel so much easier just to know why it's happening.
Yeah.
Just to understand the background and just to understand that the person you love and who loves you isn't intentionally doing this to cause you harm, but that there's something that's actually happening there backing this up. And now you can approach it from that. This isn't about me or against me.
Yeah, so I think the crux of this conversation today is going to be talking about specific complaints that you've seen people have about their partner.
Yeah.
And then understanding that their partner is neurodivergent. Mm-hmm. And that some of those complaints are relevant to the fact that they're neurodivergent. And not to the fact that there's like an inherent problem in your relationship.
Yeah.
But you're not on the same page.
Yep.
You're literally not speaking each other's language.
And now on the other hand, when sometimes I'm just much too loud, you signal to me, and now I know when that's happening, which has been helpful in like public spaces or phone calls, which is normally when it happens. Yeah,
it's a really it's a highly kind of private signal between the two of us that nobody could ever figure out where I go. Like, hey, lower that volume, girl.
Yeah. So now I understand that, and that's been helpful.
And for me now, it's no problem to ask you to repeat yourself. And I think that a lot of relationships go through stuff like this where it's kind of like on its surface like a silly problem, but it's repetitive, so it becomes a bigger issue.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so I want to put these silly problems to rest.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, okay, so I think that it is these silly problems.
Surface level.
Are these like surface level things where just we miss each other in communication. Right. We just don't get it. But it turns into a whole narrative. So I think that started to feed this narrative to you that I didn't respect you. And so now you're going to read that lack of respect and that intentionality about my actions into everything else that bothers you. And so I think it's really easy. Couples will come in and be like, my partner doesn't disrespects me. And so often we're able to trace that back to something that doesn't have anything to do with that.
Doesn't have anything to do with disrespect.
But now the story has become one of respect or disrespect.
Yeah. I definitely acknowledge that. So, okay, your turn. What's something about me being ADHD that was problematic for you?
It was you losing track of time. Was one of the big ones. And it's one that I hear all of the time. My boyfriend goes off and plays video games and he says he'll be gone for an hour and then it's 3 hours. And I think he's ignoring me for his friends. I think that he doesn't care about the things we've agreed to do. And we would be, have a plan. Okay, let's cook dinner at this time or let's leave at this time. And you'd go, okay, I'll take the next 15 minutes or half an hour or whatever to go do this thing. And then you would just disappear. And it's easy to read that as again, kind of a pattern of disrespect. My partner doesn't care about the plans that we make together.
Right.
They're not prioritizing me enough. But what's going on there, Price?
Oops. I lose track of time really easily, where 5 minutes can quickly become an hour.
Yep.
I mean, just the other night, I was having trouble sleeping, and I was laying in bed awake, just staring at the ceiling, really trying to fall asleep. My mind was running, racing. I had a lot on my mind. And I thought that it had been maybe an hour or an hour and a half of me laying there. And I had been laying there for 5 hours.
Yeah.
It was 2:30 in the morning. We went to bed early that night.
Yeah.
And it just was like really hard to face that as like reality. Like, it really stunned me in a very like visceral way. Like, it's been 5 fucking hours that I've been laying here. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, Bryce, you are untethered. You're completely untethered from reality right now. What the hell is going on? You know?
So most commonly, this is tied to an ADHD trait called time blindness, which is really this disconnect from being able to tell the passing of time. So what's actually happening is that ADHD is a difference in your ability to focus. So it's not an inability to focus, which is what a lot of people think it is, or kind of how we've characterized it over time. ADHD people can't concentrate on things. Really, it's a difference in focus. So it tends to be that either you struggle to focus on one thing at a time, or you hyper-focus.
Right.
And a consequence of hyper-focusing is that you can just completely lose track of time. And so when you get into something, and we've talked about these filters before, that ADHD filters are something that is novel, interesting, challenging, or urgent. That's what when it meets those filters, that's what allows it to get into your brain. That's what you pay attention to. And when it is one of those things, you can go into this hyper-focus mode and not be aware of the passing of time.
And I can't understate that in those moments where you were feeling overlooked by me because I wasn't because I was off doing something else when I had agreed to be doing something with you.
Yeah.
I can't overstate or overemphasize how much that wasn't about you or about not wanting to be with you, but truly I had gotten lost in time.
So here's another pattern of me assuming that something that you were doing was about me,
right,
and not about something else that was going on for you. It was an intentional slight when really you're just losing track of time. And so we've dealt with that in a couple different ways. One, you have a timer that sits on your desk, and we've talked about this before as well, but you have a timer that sits on your desk that you'll even just set for like an hour at a time just to keep track of the passing of time. Yeah,
if I'm sitting down, one of my favorite ways to relax and unwind is to play some video games. Mm-hmm. Even if there's no reason for me to, like, I don't have something that I have to leave for. You know, I can just play until I'm done. And then,
right, even if it's a weekend, you have all day to do whatever you want.
I will still set a timer at hour increments just so that I can have a tether to, like, a real timeline, and I don't get lost in it. So every time I hear that timer go off, I am reminding myself it has been an hour. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter how long it's felt like it's been. Yeah. It's been an hour.
And then you'll set that if there's a specific time that you need to be done. We're going to start cooking dinner at X time. So you'll set, a 30-minute timer. And then something else, since I've been able to separate myself from that being about me or about the way that you're prioritizing me, it does not bother me to ask if you need a reminder or if, or for me to go in there and be like, hey, do you know it's been an hour? Are you still up to do this thing that we agreed to do?
Or just checking to make sure that I've set a timer.
Yeah.
For whatever I'm doing.
Yep.
Or if I'm going out with friends and you need me back at a certain time, being willing and able to send me a text reminder like, hey, you need to be wrapping up. Yeah. Just little things like that go a long way to kind of
it's a way
that we can support each other.
Exactly. It's a way that I get to show love to you. Yeah. But it's also something that you take personal responsibility for and set those timers and do that. But part of a partnership is the way that we balance each other out. it is impossible for me to ignore an upcoming moment that's about to happen. And so I have that like internal anxious timer, and I'm able to be like, hey, do you know we're about to leave in 15 minutes? And then you can go get ready.
Yeah. No, I haven't put all responsibility for like timeliness in my life on you, but you have certainly helped me, especially when I just directly ask for it. And that's the other thing, is like knowing that I suffer from time blindness enables me to like cognitively counteract that by asking for help, by setting a timer, by just knowing that exists in my life. Because before that, we never called it anything. I was just rude as hell.
Yep.
You know?
But it's something that I hear again and again from clients, and a lot of times what they're not having on the other side is a conversation about it. So they're just assuming, boyfriend isn't prioritizing them when he gets lost in time, when he gets stuck doing the thing that he's doing. And I'm like, other than the fact that this one thing is happening, is there any other factual data to back that up? Yeah. Is he excited when you do walk in the room and they're like, yes, he's thrilled to see me, even though it's been 3 hours and he said it'd be 1? Or, they're not having the conversation on the other side of that to go, how can we balance this? What's really happening here? And a lot of times what's happening is that they have an ADHD partner who has time blindness.
Because to the rest of the world, if your partner says, I'll be back in an hour, and 3 hours go by and they're not back, that is rude.
Sure. Yeah, that's incredibly rude.
Yeah, to respond to that, for your response to that to be offended is totally natural, totally normal. Yeah. But if you learn something about your partner that gives more context to that, and your partner is able to learn about that and start taking like steps to counteract that, then all of a sudden it's not as offensive, because it's not like deliberately against you.
Yeah. Again, it doesn't have something to do with you. It's about something that's going on with them.
So let's talk about a few common complaints that you hear from people who have partners who are ADHD. Okay. Or who have ADHD. Or wait.
I think you can say it both ways. Okay. So for autistic people, by a large percentage, prefer identity first language, prefer to say that they are autistic, not they're an autistic person or a person with autism. Right. Person with autism, that's person first language. They tend to prefer identity first language. ADHDers, I don't know that there tends to be such a strong preference, but a lot of people say that they're somebody with ADHD.
I am ADHD.
That's allowed.
I want you to know I am ADHD. I don't have it. I am.
This old, like, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. Like, that's us with these two things. I am this thing. It impacts every bit of my life.
So I've got a few notes here of complaints that you've told me you've heard from clients. Okay. So perfect. My partner is insensitive and rude. Yep.
Yeah. I hear that one all of the time. And again, here's a thing where a lot of these traits outside of the context of having something else going on, there are a lot of things that can bring that up. Somebody who's depressed might seem insensitive and rude, somebody who's whatever. But without the context, these just are things that are rude, that are inconsiderate within a relationship. But there are a lot of other reasons for them. So within neurodivergence, something that's happening with people with ADHD, a couple of things can be happening. But one of the biggest things is that the part of the brain, the ACC, that applies the brakes, that kind of stops you before you do something and it gives you the time to consider it, does not tend to function very well in people who are ADHD. That there's a lot of impulse control issues because the brakes don't work. And so, we all have thoughts, we all have things that are insensitive, and it's much more likely if you're an ADHD person that those things are going to come spilling out of your mouth.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a thing that I hear about a lot from people who have an ADHD partner. And
what sort of advice do you give them?
Well, one, again, is understanding the way that their brain works, that's going to happen. A lot of what we're going to focus on in that sort of situation, one is getting to give feedback on how those things are impacting you, is getting to build up this sense of empathy. Like, this is the way those things hit me when you say that.
Right.
And getting to talk through and provide context for that. So a lot of that is going to be pausing and getting to have a conversation around it. And then the other side of that is going to be working on repair. So the great news about relationships is that you don't have to get it right all of the time. It's okay if you're a partner who often puts their foot in their mouth, or if you have a partner who does, or if you get things wrong. Because one of the more important things, hello, Greg, one of the more important things is that you know how to make a repair attempt, which is to be able to call out that something happened and to apologize well for it and to reconnect moving forward. And strong relationships involve people who are good at making repairs.
Right. I think we need to be careful to say what we're not advocating for is somebody can just be rude as can be.
Yep.
And say, well, I have ADHD, so you have to deal with that. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, a reason that might be happening is because the brakes in your brain don't work as well, but you're absolutely, responsible for what's going on within your relationship and the way that you're contributing to the pain that your partner's going through.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a lot of navigating that. And for ADHD folks, responding to a partner who's telling you to stop or slow down, to take that seriously so that you can take a minute to figure out what's going on and what might have been said.
Yeah.
And learning how to make those repairs, and then learning how to think differently about those things moving forward.
I think the biggest problem is that we assume that our partner's brains work like ours do.
Right.
So I say something rude and you're like, I premeditate everything that I say. Every word that comes out of my mouth, I've thought through. So the fact that you just said that to me is so over the line.
Yes, that's the perfect point to make. So something that's happening with my brain, and that can be common in an autistic brain, is that there's a lot of planning that goes into speech and thought.
Yeah.
Again, these things aren't 100% true across the board for everybody who's either autistic or ADHD. But for me, most of the things I say, I've thought about again and again and again and again, and you're getting this very intentional version of the thing that I meant to say. And so when something insensitive comes out of your mouth, Which has never happened, obviously. But in this weird universe where that has, I'm assuming that you have thought through that thing and carefully constructed it to hurt my feelings.
Right.
Here's the other thing that can happen in a relationship where you have somebody who is ADHD and somebody who is autistic, or somebody who is not ADHD but the partner is autistic. Autistic people tend to receive things very literally. There's a lot of misconceptions that means that autistic people can't understand jokes or can't understand sarcasm. And not only is that not true, a lot of autistic people love sarcasm and love, making jokes and humor and saying things that aren't true for the, to be hilarious.
You're one of the most sarcastic people that I know.
Yeah. But, okay, so that's not what's going on. But I do tend to receive things literally. And so sometimes you have made comments and I have received those things to be literally true and not understood a way that you were being silly. If it was maybe, I don't know if that comes down to a change in tone for you, or it's something I'm already thinking about or concerned about.
There have absolutely been moments where I have said something to you that you took as an insult. Mm-hmm. That I didn't, the way you received whatever I said was totally not aligned with what I was trying to communicate. And it has taken you to saying as much for me to even realize that you heard something different than what I communicated.
Yes. So that's another point where it's not so much your breaks that are at play.
Right.
It's that every relationship is going to involve learning each other's language. A huge thing that happens in relationships is that we have to learn the language of the other person we're with. And that's always going to be true no matter how similar our backgrounds are, because we just all interpret the world slightly differently.
Well, a lot of people say that you need to learn your partner's love language, but you also need to learn your partner's language in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And that goes all the way down to just the home that they were raised in, how their family spoke to each other, and how they worked through things, like with their friends, but also like for neurodivergent individuals, how their brain works.
Yep.
Okay.
So something that's important there is that we're giving each other feedback, that instead of assuming that something was, again, intentional, that it was about us, that we're stopping and having that conversation about how we receive something, making sure that that's how it was meant, and then we're coming to an agreement about how we can move forward in the future.
Right.
So either, okay, I'm not going to take it literally when you say that. Now I know that that's a way that you're joking. Or you're saying, oh, that's really hurtful and I can see why it's that way. I won't make that sort of comment again. But that we're having a conversation around the things that we're saying. And then it's okay for you to feel strongly. I mean, at that point now we're recognizing a pattern if your partner continues to do those things.
Right.
So it's okay to have a couple of times where we're learning and having similar but different circumstances and that sort of thing. But it's okay to notice pattern too. Maybe somebody's rude.
Yeah, maybe they're just rude as hell and nothing is going to change that.
Yeah, they're not treating you with kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But me coming to you saying something that hurts you, you thinking, oh, he may not have meant it the way that I heard it, giving me the benefit of the doubt, communicating that you were hurt, allows me then to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And to correct the record.
And a great thing about ADHD people is that they do tend to be good communicators, and they do tend to be good at making repairs, because when you're somebody who does frequently say things that you wish you didn't say, you get really good at learning how to make those attempts. I think that you apologize better than anybody that I know. You're more willing to go, oh yeah, that was my bad. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, imagine me saying something that like hurts your feelings and then like sticking by my guns when that's not what I meant.
Right. You know, I wish I didn't say it too.
Of course, I'm like, shit. Oh, that is not what I meant, dude. My bad. Like, yeah. let me better articulate myself. You know, and I think that a lot of huge fights happen because you have incident like that or after incident like that where nothing's ever addressed. Because you're just hurt, you just accept that as purposeful, and then finally something pushes you over the edge, and then you're blowing up.
Yeah, and I'm like,
reasonably.
Yeah.
But you're blowing up over, and I'm sitting here like, what is she talking about?
I feel at this point like I can point now to a whole history of times where you've hurt my feelings, but we never actually stopped and talked about it because there were all these little incidences that now have led up to me feeling like we can't repair, that we can't move forward.
And again, I want to restate that we're talking about people who are like working with the partner in good faith.
Yeah.
You know, like we're both intending to like better ourselves and better each other in this relationship. Of course, if somebody's just rude to you all the time, and especially after you start addressing it, that's a different ballgame altogether. That's not what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So I think that in the future, we'll probably end up doing an episode about what some signs of abusive things are in a relationship.
Schedule. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So in the future, we will end up talking about those things. But yeah, everything else is always going to be a conversation about a relationship that's in good faith, but you're having these miscommunications and you don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the next common complaint. My partner is messy.
Yeah. So we could be talking about a lot of things, but we're probably talking about a partner who has ADHD here.
Yeah.
So something that happens with ADHD folks is that they can have issues with object permanence.
Like a toddler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah,
hey,
ADHD.
Cover your face and say, "Where's Ashlyn?" Go ahead and do it.
Where's Ashlyn?
What the fuck? Where did Ashlyn go? What the fuck?
Okay. So yeah, something that I hear about a lot is that my partner doesn't care about the home that we share or the apartment that we share or whatever, that they're leaving their stuff everywhere, that they're missing the dirty clothes hamper, that they're not cleaning up after themselves. They leave the cabinets open. So
the other day I was looking for my cell phone and it was in my hand. I like went outside to the car looking for it. I was holding it the entire time.
I remember when that happened. You said that you found it. I didn't know that it was in your hand. Okay, so something that can happen is a lack of object permanence. And a lot of the times that has to do with, again, those filters. So the really strong ADHD filters in your brain that filter out everything that's not new, interesting, challenging, or urgent. The cup sitting out that's now empty and unused is of no significance to you. It's not upholding, or it's not, not upholding. It's not inhibiting you in your life until you're out of cups. That's when maybe an ADHD person is going, oh, I've used all the cups. Time to go make that trip to gather up.
I mean, that happened today. We filed our taxes earlier.
Mm-hmm. Hey.
Super fun. And I didn't know that I had gotten information on how to download my W-2 until today.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't relevant until today. Why the fuck would I know where my W-2 is before I needed to know where my W-2
right.
was? And
for me, it sets off that anxious filter. Everything is important. Everything must be saved and stored and filed in some sort of organized way. And so I get that information and that is flagged in my inbox until it's ready to go, or there's a note or something and you didn't even know that it was there because click, 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 didn't matter until you got to the stuff that did hit those filters.
I will point out in this instance, one of us, we both had our W-2s the entire time. I just realized it in the moment and you knew the entire time. And which one of those was better?
I mean, it worked both ways. We had all the W-2s we needed.
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay, so something that can happen is that object permanence. So if it's not hitting that filter, it's just not important. That the fact that my clothes aren't in the hamper, or the fact that your clothes aren't going into the hamper, isn't really doing anything to slow down your life. Until it's laundry day when you just pick up your clothes and you wash them. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
The whole extra steps to put it in a hamper, especially a hamper that's closed and blends in with the room and is in the far corner, just isn't going to hit that filter for you. It's not that interesting or challenging or important. And yeah, you're going to leave them on the floor. So there are a couple of solutions to this. One is something that can be really helpful is having collection sites in each room. So having some sort of basket in each room that odds and ends can go into so that you get to have that sense of organization in your home, and the ADHD person in your home has a much easier system to put things in. Or that tidying up a space is just that much easier, that it's not a huge strain on both of you. Another thing is making things impossible to miss.
Yeah.
So if for instance, with the laundry basket, we have now an open laundry basket that you basically have to trip over to get to the bathroom. And your clothes end up in there basically every single time because it's right there. It's convenient. It's easier for you to dump them in there than it is to do something else.
Yeah. I think that another small thing is that I have a designated place where my keys and wallet go. And I know that a lot of people have that, right?
Yeah, but for important things, there's a place where it always goes. It becomes part of your routine. Because
when I need my keys and my wallet, I do not remember where I left them. I just know that they're always going to be in this place because that's where they always go.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I literally remember putting them there.
Yeah.
I don't remember shit like that.
Yeah. So within enough times of you intentionally doing that, or of me reminding you, or if you having lost them and needing to reuse that system, it becomes habit. Yeah. And habits are things that don't have to cross that filter for you. That's just part of your routine. You just drop your stuff there.
But I think the biggest takeaway for somebody whose partner is messy and is very frustrating is that at a certain level, understand that it's not personal.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be messy to hurt you.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't respect our shared space.
Yeah. And in ways that so this is another one of those things where we kind of pick and choose the things that are going to matter to us. So a compromise here is that not all of those things really have to matter to me. If I walk in the kitchen and the cabinets are open, I don't care. That changes nothing functionally in our home. It's not the way I want to look at the kitchen, but it doesn't really matter, right? So it doesn't bother me to come through and close cabinet doors.
Now, it might bother you if you thought it was disrespectful.
Right. No, if I'm making this assumption that you're doing that because you don't care about our space, now that's hurting my feelings.
Absolutely.
But in the life that we live now, where I understand what's happening, I understand why the cabinet was really important to open because you're getting to what you needed, but it came off your radar as soon as you got what you needed. It doesn't bother me so much, and it takes 2 seconds of my life.
It makes me sound like such a Neanderthal. I need cup. Open cabinet. Obtain cup. I have cup. Mission accomplished.
You are so, I'm trying to think of the right word. You're so efficient in your life. You're efficient in a way that I don't usually think my brain allows me to be, where there are 100 little things, and I have a hard time distinguishing the importance of each of those things, where like everything on my to-do list has the same like bright red flag next to it that this is urgent and important. And that can get very overwhelming. And I think that you have this incredible gift as part of your ADHD where you don't get bogged down by some of those other things. Now, certainly some people with ADHD do have a hard time starting tasks. Usually those are tasks that have something else associated with it, some other emotional, overwhelming sort of thing, or too many of them. But I think that you have this really incredible ability to filter out what's not important. And
I take a lot of delight in knowing what my goal is, and then mapping out steps to that end goal.
And all of them tie in directly to that end goal.
Yeah. What's next? Like, this is the thing I'm working to. What's the next thing I need to do to accomplish that? Yeah. And I'm not talking about like I need to study to get the certification so that I can apply for these levels. I'm talking about, okay, I've established that I want to get the certification. What do I need to do right now? I need to figure out what books I need to read to get that certification. So what do I need to do that? I need to sit down and Google. Like, that's the level of like what's next. And I'm talking about what is literally the next step.
And let's bring this back to something that everybody's going to encounter at some point when it comes to like cleaning the house, for instance. You're very able to just focus at the tasks we've agreed to do. We're going to vacuum, we're going to do the dishes, and we're going to sweep. And the only things that happen for you are vacuuming and doing the dishes and sweeping.
You bet your ass that's the only, because that's all I agreed to. Show me the paperwork. I've got the receipts.
Every single one of those tasks is going to remind me of something else that needs to be done. And that can also be the way that we break down like household labor, and that can be different too. But I have a hard time differentiating between the importance of those tasks, and you're able to be so direct and efficient. So one way that we've compromised is to say some of these things just really don't matter. And I love you a lot more than I care about the kitchen cabinets being open or shut.
Thank God.
It's okay. Now, on the other hand, there are some things that I really, really, really care about.
Yeah.
And you, because you care about me, have been willing to elevate those to a level of importance where you do follow through on doing those things. And that took a process of you non-judgmentally allowing me to remind you, of you receiving that as like, yep, that is a thing that's important to you. I'm prioritizing that.
I still don't understand why we can't use like a wet rag for like wiping down counters. You know, that still doesn't make sense to me, but that is like a non-negotiable for you. Yeah. And so it's like, I don't really care.
Because then they're sticky and then I have to touch them and then sensory stuff.
Laffy, we have a cat in the way of the camera.
That's going to happen. Okay, so some of those things have been you allowing something to become a priority. Some of those things have been me agreeing that it's not a big deal. And then some of those have been functionally changing the way that something in our home works so that it's easier and that it sticks in your brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's taken you telling me, hey, this is important, that you are mindful of this.
Yeah.
And then the things that aren't important to you, you don't let resentment build over those things. And that's taken you deliberately like having to consider, what am I going to like stand for in terms of like what I articulate as a need, and what am I going to just let pass over me because I don't It's not that big of a deal.
That I take responsibility for the things that are arbitrary in life, but important to me, to remind you to do those things. And then you're able to receive those things as like, I understand that this is really important for you. And you're trying to then prioritize.
And then when it's like, I don't understand why you need this, but you rarely ask me to do something that I don't understand the need of, right? That's rare. So I'm happy to accommodate, because you're so accommodating of me.
Yeah.
You're not like, Price, you have to pick up those clothes, walk all the way around our bed, open the lid to the laundry basket, dump them in there, and close the lid, and then think about how much of your life is just a waste. You don't ask that of me. You got a different hamper, and you put it in the hallway so that I don't have to. It's just right there, and I just put my clothes in it.
Yep. Yeah, we were just able to come to that agreement.
We've gotten a lot of mileage out of that example.
A lot of mileage out of it. Maybe too much mileage.
Yeah, we probably can put the hamper to rest now. I think we've covered that enough. Okay.
Visual reminders are another thing that are important for that. If, let's say, it's important to you that this was another thing a client was dealing with, that their significant other who had ADHD wasn't taking off their shoes at the door and they were tracking in mud, because the ADHD person getting home, time for a snack, straight to the kitchen, not thinking about things along the way.
Time for a snack. Love it.
So she put up a big colorful sign that said, remember to take your shoes off. And he was able to see that on his way in and know that it was important to her. She had provided the context for why that was important, and they were able to navigate that.
Yeah. No, I think that's so helpful. Okay, so let's move on to talk about common complaints you hear about people who are in relationships with people who have autism or who are autistic.
Yeah, autistic people.
Nailed that. Autistic people. Your partner's autistic. Here are some common complaints that you might have about them. My partner doesn't make eye contact when we're talking.
Yeah.
Break that one down for me.
So it's common for people who are autistic. It's common for autistic folks to either struggle with eye contact or to make too much eye contact. Mostly making too much eye contact has to do with kind of like learning to mask that trait.
They're overcorrecting.
Yeah, overcorrecting. Yeah. So I don't know about the amount of eye contact I make, but I think with most people I make pretty constant, consistent eye contact. Maybe it's too much.
It is something you have to think about on occasion, though.
It is something I have to think about. So it's taking a mental space for me to be able to do that. There's some, jokes about being autistic that are like, now that I'm making eye contact, you think I'm paying attention, but all I can pay attention to is the fact that I'm making eye contact. Like, that's the only thing that's happening.
That sounds like a living hell to me.
So something about eye contact for autistic folks is that it can feel really overwhelming. It can be kind of way too much sensory input to focus on that. It can feel incredibly intimate to do that, and it can be a weird thing to be forced to do with just everybody all of the time. And it can, again, take up all of your focus, and now you're not able to concentrate on the conversation. If you're just listening, you can imagine me making very intimate eye contact at Ashlyn right now. So much eye contact. So yeah, I'm dating somebody who really struggles with that. Like when they talk to me, or what I think is more pertinent, when they're talking to my friends or to my family, they don't look them in the eyes. And it's really off-putting. What do you tell somebody who's complaining about that? So the first bit of that is understanding why it's difficult for autistic people to make eye contact. Another thing that can have a really uncomfortable physical sensation that goes along with it. So a lot of times it's more respectful, if you think about it, for an autistic person to not make eye contact so that they can pay attention. That if they're having to prioritize eye contact and now they're getting the sensation that comes along with that, or the overstimulation, and they're not really listening anymore. Yeah. Isn't that like less engagement than it would be for them to not look at the person directly, but to really listen to what they're saying and to be able to respond? So I think the biggest thing, because I have a little experience with this, I think the biggest thing that you can do is just understand that when somebody's not making eye contact with you,
and they're autistic, that's a sign. Consider that a sign of respect or a sign of intention. They're listening with intention. They are trying to converse with you in a real way. Yep. They don't want to be distracted by something that is extremely distracting for them.
Yeah.
And understand that their brain is working differently than your brain is.
Yeah.
With that in mind,
and that there's a real thing that's happening there.
Yeah,
that's
it's
real. Not like, well, if you practice it more, you can get it. Like that sensation stays, the lack of focus stays, all of those things stay.
Yeah, that is factual. That is not changing.
Yeah.
So if you're able to accept it, a few things that you're able to do is maybe when you're talking to somebody who's autistic and struggling with eye contact is position yourself next to them. So you're looking away.
I love having conversations sitting next to autistic friends looking at the same things.
Yeah, that's an easy dub for that whole scenario. Also, like laying them up when they go to meet friends and family by letting your friends and family know, hey, Peter's just not going to make eye contact with you. I don't want you to...
Yeah, if that's okay with them, either the other person...
Yeah, consent's important for that.
Yeah, but either the other person or the autistic person might say like, hey, I'm autistic, I'm not going to make eye contact, I'm paying attention. And then to learn about the other ways that we show that we're paying attention in conversation, because eye contact isn't the only thing that happens, and for autistic people, it's not the most important part of... showing that you're engaging with somebody. So I do a lot of verbal engagement when somebody's talking to me. I'm constantly, probably obnoxiously uh-huh-ing, yes, agreeing, because it matters to me that you know that I'm paying attention. And it's tough for me to...
You're an active listener.
Yeah. So learning about what other forms of active listening are, and if you are autistic, a way that you can take personal responsibility for your engagement with other people is to maybe you decide to just come out in front of it and say, hey, I'm autistic, not going to make eye contact. This is just how it's going to be. Right. Or maybe you're learning other forms of active listening so that you have other ways to communicate to the people around you that you really care about what they're saying.
And I think that if you really want to show love to somebody who struggles with making eye contact, is don't make eye contact with them. Yeah. Overwhelmingly. And it's not like, hey, when he walks in the room, don't look in his fucking eyes.
Nobody look at him.
No, he gets really aggressive when you look in his eyes. He thinks it's a sign of domineering and he thinks it's a threat. No, what I'm saying is that if somebody's really struggling with making eye contact, staring them down in the retinas is not the play. Yep. Because it creates a dynamic where they are glancing up, they are making eye contact intermittently to really see like how something lands, or they say something and they glance up to you to make kind of an estimation of like how the communication is going, which is very normal, and that happens even if you struggle with making prolonged eye contact. They are looking, and if I look up and you're staring me down,
that's a lot.
That is a lot, So I know and talk to a lot of autistic people on a pretty regular basis now, and I've learned to just look somewhere else, and it's easy for me because I love eye contact. I'm all about that eye contact, right?
And then here's something else for partners, families, and friends, is that if you are struggling to feel heard during a conversation with your autistic loved one, getting to say, hey, I really don't feel like you're hearing me now. Yeah. Is there some way you can let me know that you're paying attention to me? Is there some different way that we can agree upon? So you can say like, hey, it's tough for me to talk to you when you're not able to make eye contact with me. And instead of forcing them into that, where once again, you're forcing them into a situation where they're not really paying attention anymore. Right. Let's brainstorm. Let's figure out a different way where I can feel heard.
Okay, let's move on to another one on our list. My partner is not interested in the things that are important to me.
Okay, so this can go both ways, but this is probably focusing around autism, and it's either somebody who is autistic or somebody who has an autistic partner. Yeah. So an important part of autism, and no trait is common to every single autistic person, but something that's important.
They're not all exactly the same?
Not all exactly the same. Weirdly, it's like they're people. Yeah. Is special interests. Yeah. So special interests are areas of intense focus. Something that a lot of autistic people are really, really strong in is their ability to deep dive and research something at an incredibly intense level. Oh, yeah. To know everything about the things that they care about.
Oh, yeah.
And so it might be when somebody has a partner who is autistic, that person is so focused in their special interests that you feel like they won't stop talking about that handful of things that they really, really care about, and they won't care about the things that you care about. Also, maybe it's a complaint from somebody who is autistic that their partner just isn't as into their area of special interest.
I don't like Doctor Who. I'm sorry. I'll come out and say it. I'm just not interested. I don't need to know about all 40 fucking seasons of Doctor Who. You know, I'm just... I needed to get that off my chest. I'm sorry.
Sounds like it.
Like, I get that you draw your life energy from the Doctor, but I'm good, you know?
So it's important to understand that if what's going on is that you love somebody who's autistic and they only care about this handful of things, how much that is a way that autistic people connect with the world, that they tend to understand the rest of the world through their special interests. And if you really want to plug in with them on other things that you care about, finding a way to relate it back to their special interest is really going to allow for a lot of connection there. Something that I do as a counselor in sessions, that when I have an autistic client, we're mostly talking about their special interest. And out of that, we're talking about things that are important to them, the way that that relates to the way that they understand relationships or the way that they understand, whatever. But that we're coming back to this thing that they really care about and that connects them to the world. And so it's another one of those things where you're understanding that it's not about them trying to avoid the things that you care about, but it's that probably their link to the world and to connecting with people is through this thing.
Yeah.
Something else that's important to know about autistic people is that, or if you're autistic, is that we are able to expand those interests and that we often include the people we care about as almost a special interest. So in a lot of ways, I'm like an expert on you and the things that you care about. And you're one of the things that I feel like I have deeply researched and become interested in. And that a lot of the ways that autistic folks show love to the people they care about is wanting to do those deep dives into the things that relate to them. And really understanding those things, and that if your autistic partner is researching something to do with you, that's such an autistic love language. And it's really... that you can recognize those things for what they are.
That's really nice. How can we pull our partner into things that we want to talk about? That maybe are unrelated.
Yep.
Because I can't relate every single thing back to Star Wars or
that's
whatever
completely fair.
It is, you know.
So this is going to be a place where either finding a common interest is important, or being able to talk to your partner about what that's like. That like, hey, we constantly keep coming back to this conversation and I'm not feeling heard by you right now. I know that this is important to you. It's important to me too, since it's important to you, but I really need to talk about this unrelated thing. And something else that can be useful is finding other forms of communication. So sometimes autistic people, something that can happen that helps us communicate is scripting, where we talk about the things that we know how to talk about, that either we've practiced talking about or we have listened to a lot of people talking about. Again, it relates to that like deep dive. And something that can be really helpful is maybe like having that conversation in writing. Sometimes that's easier for an autistic person so that they can do that really complex thinking through the thing 100 times and then sharing that with you, and that you can go back and forth. I know some partners who are both autistic and they share a note, like an Apple Note. And so they both get to type into this note. Okay. And it's the way that they process things together, because it's tough for them to have a new conversation out loud for the first time.
Interesting. Yeah, that's not a problem for me, but I'm not autistic, so it's hard for me to relate to that.
You love verbal processing. You love getting to like spill your thoughts out for the first time out loud and sort through them that way.
Because I'm a messy bitch.
That's something that I don't relate to, is being able to share those things out loud for the first time.
I think the other thought on my mind is giving somebody a heads up that you want to talk about something.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, hey, tomorrow night, can we sit down and talk through this thing, you know?
Yes. And with autistic people in our lives, it's so funny because when we give them a heads up, they tend to come to those conversations really prepared. They have thought through every bit of that. And so you're going to end up feeling really valued in that conversation, and they didn't have to think of it on the spot. That's such a good point.
Yeah. Like, hey, can you come to dinner and prepare to talk about this? And they're like, yeah, what's my office supplies budget? Gonna need a 3-ring binder, a printer. I might have some people fax me some stuff.
We're going to continue this conversation again and again and again because now I know everything about it. But, yeah.
No, I've recently asked an autistic person to do some research on my behalf, and I have been absolutely blown away with the sheer amount of information I've been receiving. You know, the correlation between like autistic humans and their success, generally speaking, in like any sort of database management or
any research-based projects. Yeah. I don't know which other one you were going for.
I'm going to edit this out to make myself sound smarter, I think. But you know what I mean? Like the analytical, research-based sorts of projects are usually very friendly towards people who have brains that work like that in the first place, right?
Yeah, that want to do a deep dive to really understand something.
Yeah.
In fact, that is a big holdup for autistic folks, is that they tend not to want to have a conversation about something they haven't had the chance to think about or research before. And so that's another reason why prepping for the conversation, saying, hey, can we talk about this later this week, can be really helpful.
I think what's cool about this dialogue, though, when we take a step back and look at everything that we've been talking about today, is that the answer is pretty straightforward for all of it, which is have an attitude of kindness.
And curiosity.
Great.
Yeah.
And communicate.
Yeah.
Communicate the things that are working and communicate the things that aren't working in good faith, assuming that your partner is someone who also wants your relationship to work.
Yeah, your partner wants to do things that help make the relationship better. They want you to like be happy and fulfilled within the relationship, and that it tends to be a lack of communication, and especially maybe direct communication, that maybe you think that you're communicating your need because you're vaguely picking about something,
right,
or saying this thing doesn't happen, but you need to say, here's a thing that I need and here's how I need that thing.
And if you're listening, I think take it from both of us that it's just knowledge that melts away some of this frustration.
Yeah.
Right? It's like when I knew that you weren't trying to be too quiet on purpose, immediately I lost any feeling of frustration towards that situation. Because it was no longer about me. You're just too quiet sometimes.
Yeah. And same thing with the time blindness, is that as soon as I knew that it wasn't because you just didn't care enough about the things that we had agreed to do together, and you had a real thing that you were experiencing that was preventing you from being able to keep track of time, it's like, oh, we can problem solve this. Yeah. And when this happens, I know why it's happening.
And the beautiful thing is that we are so much stronger for having brains that are different from one another.
Oh my gosh, what a value to our relationship to have very different brains. We are good at such different things, and I think a lot of the times, in a lot of the areas where I have a weakness, you have a strength there. I always feel like between the two of us, we can learn to do anything.
What is it that Thanos guy said? Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. And he said that before he like killed half the people in the galaxy. But
it was a good point.
It's applicable here, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that to kind of summarize, you know, what we're hearing from you today is to assume the best of our partners, to operate in good faith, and to communicate with them. Do
we have time to go over a couple of strengths of ADHD people and autistic people?
Okay, absolutely. Cool.
Yay!
Yeah. What are some strengths of people who have ADHD in a relationship? What are they bringing to the table that makes them really great in a relationship setting?
Almost across the board, so consistently, I hear from people who have an ADHD partner that that one of the reasons they fell in love with them is the spontaneity that they bring to the relationship. That same thing that causes impulsiveness makes them so spontaneous and fun, and that they bring a lot of light and joy to the relationship. And that they're willing to try new things because they're wanting to seek out that new stimulation, that new engagement.
Right.
And so they're ready to go do something new, and that's very exciting. They tend to be very creative and have a good sense of humor, since those are things that take being willing to try new things. They tend to be willing to try new things, which is just important in general. They... there was another thing I wanted to say. They tend to be good at making apologies and be good communicators. Again, because when you know you're going to get stuff wrong, you have to learn to balance that out. They tend to be really even like protective and loyal to the people that they're with. Yeah, they're really great partners. I'm so glad to have an ADHD partner.
Yeah.
And you're willing to take on situations that are very overwhelming for me. And I find that really beneficial in a relationship, that some of the things that make you sometimes overwhelming to me are the things that help make my path in the world so much easier. That it's kind of that extrovert introvert thing where we go out into a crowd of people and you're able to immediately do some of the engagement and conversation and like, oh, I have the time to think it through, to do my autistic processing and go, oh yeah, I know where to join in this conversation, and you like clear the way for me. It's lovely.
Yeah, totally. What about what are autistic people bringing to the table when they're in a relationship?
There are probably a lot of hidden ways that they're loving you. Again, like deep diving that research, learning your patterns and habits, and trying to like correspond to those things and anticipate things that you care about. They are also really loyal partners, and autistic love is often described as just like really intensive. A lot of times autistic people don't lose that like in love feeling, that they tend to keep up that feeling, and that's going to bring a lot of closeness between the two of you. I'm trying to think, do we have anything else written down?
You can't think of anything else that you're bringing to the table? Is that what you're communicating to me?
That's what I'm communicating.
I think that one of the biggest things I would say is that the big wide world is a little overwhelming to you. Mm-hmm. You like to be here with me. Yeah. I'm your person.
Yeah.
You're fiercely loyal to me.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not all just because you're autistic by any means, but I think that the fact that you are autistic lends itself to those things being more true.
Yeah.
And I also think that you've invested an incredible amount of time to help me understand who I am, because you're doing that research on
yeah, because I'm trying to figure you out and learn you.
Yeah.
And so you have benefited from learning yourself in that way.
Yeah.
Another thing is that there are so many things that I know are sensitivities for me that just don't make sense in the world. And so when you have some like weird need around something, it doesn't have to make sense to me to want to figure out how to accommodate. Like, I get it. For me, sometimes the world is just too loud and I need accommodation for that. And so when you have a specific need around something, that doesn't bother me to try to figure out.
I think that the big thing for both parties is that sometimes we're a little fucking weird.
We're a little weird.
And we get to be a little weird with each other.
I love the way that all throughout our relationship, a strength of ours has just been allowing the other person to be human.
Yeah.
That there wasn't a point where we were really able, as soon as we were getting to know one another, we weren't really able to mask what are some of our things that just don't feel like they fit in with the way that the world is. And those are some of the things that we love most about each other and have allowed to exist.
That makes me feel like I'm better able to love you, and I am better able to be loved by you.
Yep.
Because I feel like I get to be myself.
Yep.
Okay. Well, dear listener, if you're enjoying the podcast, if you're not transphobic...
pretty please leave a review.
I don't want to live a life of asking for that, and I imagine that will stop soon, but it will help us, especially in these early days, get some traction as we're going. If we could get some decent positive reviews wherever you're listening to this podcast, that'll help tremendously with us getting the ball rolling as we're really investing some time and energy into producing this. So, yeah, that would be much appreciated. Well, Ashlyn, I think that will summarize everything for today. Is there anything else on your mind?
No, that's everything for me on this topic. I love talking about both of these things. Oh,
God. Oh, we have 5 cats, and it is...
Oh, it's a lot. One of the hateful comments was calling me a cat lady, which I secretly adored.
Yeah, that's not even a hate comment. That's just factual.
It was facts. Where can people find me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, where can people find you, Ashley?
Okay, so you can find me at therapywith_Ash on Instagram. And then you can find the counseling center at ashtreecounselingcenter.com or Ashtree Counseling Center on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
And we'll be publishing some complimentary blog posts to go along with this podcast, kind of summarizing a lot of what we've talked about. There were some points that we didn't get to in there, with some helpful resources for people who are in relationships with other folks who are neurodivergent.
Yeah.
So if you want more information, be sure to check those out. And with that, I think we can call it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
And we'll see you next time on I Married Your Therapist.
Freaking cats. Transphobes and cats, man. They'll be the death of this podcast.